Like and subscribe right now if you love stories about justice and people getting caught in their own traps. Don't miss a single video. Hit that notification bell for more shocking stories. Susan Mitchell stood in her driveway with her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands, her face red with anger. She pointed at the mailbox in front of James Cooper's house. "That mailbox is exactly 2 inches too tall according to HOA regulations," she screamed. "I'm filing a violation notice and you'll pay a $500 fine." James, a retired teacher with a kind heart, tried to explain that the mailbox had been approved by the previous HOA president. But Susan didn't care about facts. She had absolute power as the current HOA president, and she was going to use it to make everyone's life miserable. But this time, she had no idea that James had been secretly recording everything. And he had an even bigger surprise waiting for her. Meadowbrook Gardens was supposed to be a peaceful suburban neighborhood where families could live, work, and enjoy quiet evenings on their porches. It was a community of 65 homes, most owned by working people and retirees who just wanted a nice place to call home. That was before Susan Mitchell became HOA president. Susan was what people called a Karen, a woman obsessed with control, rules, and power. She had no interest in helping her community. She was interested in ruling it. She implemented dozens of new rules that had never existed before. Grass could only be cut on certain days. No visible trash cans, even though there was nowhere to hide them. No colors on front doors except beige and gray. No children's toys visible in yards. And no guests could park on the street after 6 p.m. Every rule had a fine attached. Usually $300 to $500, James Cooper had lived in Meadowbrook Gardens for 20 years. He was a beloved retired teacher who helped neighborhood kids with homework, donated to local charities, and kept his house beautifully maintained. He had a kind word for everyone, but he refused to live in fear of Susan Mitchell. Other neighbors were terrified. A family with young children received fines every week for toys visible in their yard. An elderly woman was fined for having her daughter visit and park on the street. A veteran was threatened with legal action for keeping his lawn slightly longer than the 3-inch maximum. He couldn't afford a landscaper on his military pension. People tried to stand up to Susan at HOA meetings, but she controlled the meetings. She didn't allow questions or complaints. She made decisions unilaterally and silenced anyone who disagreed. She was drunk on power. Susan's reign of terror lasted 8 months. In that time, she'd collected over $45,000 in fines. Nobody knew exactly where that money was going because she refused to provide detailed accounting reports. That's when James decided something had to change. James wasn't an angry man, but he was tired of watching his neighbors suffer. He watched a single mother cry because she couldn't pay a $300 fine for her son's bicycle being visible in the driveway for one day. He heard about an elderly couple who seriously considered moving after receiving 5 fines in 3 months, draining their retirement savings. The breaking point came when Susan threatened to put a lien on the house of Marcus Rodriguez, a hard-working maintenance worker, because he couldn't pay the accumulated fines. Marcus was struggling to keep up with his mortgage payments after a medical emergency. The threat of losing his house over HOA fines was destroying him emotionally. That's when James decided to document everything. He started attending every HOA meeting with a hidden camera. He recorded Susan's abuse of power, her refusal to answer financial questions, her threats against residents who challenged her authority. He documented everything: the unfair fines, the missing money, the intimidation tactics. James also reached out to the other homeowners. He organized a neighborhood group chat where people could share their experiences. The stories were heartbreaking. Nobody felt safe anymore. The community that was supposed to be peaceful had become a place of fear and anxiety. One day, Susan showed up at James's house without warning. She was furious because James had the audacity to question her at the last HOA meeting. "I'm here to personally inform you that I'm fining you. $1,000 for having a political sign in your window," she said, holding up a citation. James had a small sign supporting a local candidate. "Political signs are not allowed in Meadowbrook Gardens," James calmly responded. "Susan, I've checked the HOA bylaws. Political signs are explicitly allowed." "You're making up rules now." Susan's face turned purple with rage. "You dare question me? I'm the HOA president. I decide what the rules are." She started screaming at him, calling him names, threatening to fine every member of his family. "I'm going to make your life so miserable you'll wish you never moved here." A neighbor across the street was listening to everything. She later told police it was the most abusive language she'd ever heard. Susan then did something that sealed her fate. She grabbed James's sign from his window and ripped it up, destroying his property in front of witnesses. "There, no more political sign," she said triumphantly. "And now I'm fining you an additional $2,000 for having to remove it personally. You can pay the $3,000 total by Friday, or I'm putting a lien on your house." James just smiled. He had everything recorded on his phone and on security cameras. He had witnesses, and he had something else. He'd been in contact with the state attorney's office about potential fraud and abuse of power. 1 week later, state investigators showed up at Susan's house with a search warrant. The community watched as federal agents in suits carried boxes of documents out of her home. Neighbors gathered on their porches, their faces showing a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Susan had been stealing from the HOA. The investigation revealed that she had been depositing HOA fines into a personal bank account, not the community account. She'd collected $45,000 over 8 months, and almost none of it went where it was supposed to go. She had used HOA money to pay for personal trips, restaurant meals, and even a down payment on a new car. But that wasn't all. The investigators also found that Susan had been abusing her power in ways that violated state housing discrimination laws. She had been selectively enforcing rules against certain residents, particularly those who questioned her authority, while ignoring violations from people she liked. She had threatened residents with legal action to scare them into silence. On the day of Susan's arrest, the police came with cameras rolling. She was read her rights and placed in handcuffs in front of the entire neighborhood. The video went viral, over 2 million views within 24 hours. "This is a mistake." Susan screamed as officers led her to the police car. "These people are lying! I was just doing my job." But the evidence was overwhelming. Security camera footage, recorded conversations, financial records, witness testimony. James had built an airtight case. The prosecutor charged Susan with embezzlement of community funds, fraud, abuse of power, harassment, property destruction, the political sign incident, violating fair housing laws at the trial. Victim after victim testified about how Susan's reign of terror had affected them. The single mother talked about not being able to afford her child's birthday party because of fines. The elderly couple described the stress and fear. The veteran spoke about how disrespected he felt. Marcus Rodriguez cried as he talked about almost losing his house. James presented his evidence: video recordings of Susan screaming at residents, financial records showing missing money, and documentation of her selective enforcement of rules. The jury found Susan guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. She was ordered to repay all $45,000 she'd stolen, plus an additional $20,000 in restitution for emotional distress. She was banned from ever holding any HOA position again. After Susan's conviction, the neighborhood held a community celebration. The new HOA president, elected by a Democratic vote, immediately reversed all of Susan's unfair rules. He simplified the bylaws and promised transparent financial accounting. The fines that residents had paid under duress were refunded. Families received checks in the mail. The single mother got $200. Marcus Rodriguez received $3,500. The elderly couple got $2,100. Suddenly, people could breathe again. James became something of a local hero. News outlets called him a whistleblower and a community defender. But James didn't see himself that way. He just saw someone who had done what was right. "I didn't do this to become famous," James told a reporter. "I did it because nobody should be afraid to live in their own home. Nobody should be bullied by someone who has a little bit of power. When you see injustice, you have to speak up, not with anger, but with evidence and truth." The HOA bylaws were completely rewritten to include checks and balances, financial transparency requirements, and clear procedures for residents to appeal violations. The community installed a new rule: no single person could make unilateral decisions. All major decisions required a vote from the homeowners. Meadowbrook Gardens became a model neighborhood where people felt safe and respected. Property values actually increased because families wanted to move to a community without an intimidating HOA. Susan served 17 months of her 3-year sentence before being released to a halfway house. But she would never be the same. Her reputation was destroyed. Every search of her name brought up articles about her crimes. She became a cautionary tale about what happens when someone abuses power. The lesson is powerful and timeless. Power given without accountability creates tyrants. But truth and evidence will always overcome corruption and bullying. Susan thought she was untouchable. She thought her position made her above the law. She was wrong. Justice might move slowly, but it moves. And those who abuse power will eventually face consequences. Respect the law. Follow the rules yourself. And always remember that documentation and truth are more powerful than threats and intimidation. This story shows us that one person with courage and evidence can stand up against tyranny, even when that tyranny hides behind official titles and authority. Susan Mitchell abused power in a small neighborhood, but the same principles apply everywhere: offices, schools, communities, and governments. Have you ever experienced someone abusing their authority? Have you ever seen justice catch up with someone who deserved it? Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about justice, karma, and people getting caught in their own traps. Hit that notification bell right now so you never miss our latest uploads. Comment below. Tell us about a time when you or someone you know stood up to injustice or abuse of power. Share your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire thousands of people to take action against unfairness and corruption. Thanks for watching. Susan's story reminds us that truth and documentation are powerful tools against tyranny. No matter how much power someone has, justice always catches up. See you in the next video where we'll share another shocking story about someone who thought they were untouchable.